Good afternoon and welcome to our regular council meeting for January 17th, 2022. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories and the oral practices of the Blackfoot Nation, which include the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani. We also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation at Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We're making this acknowledgement to demonstrate our continuing efforts to work together as we strive for reconciliation through increased and collective learning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Moved by Councillor Goodenough that the agenda be adopted. Any items to delete or add to the agenda? All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Idris that the minutes from the regular council meeting held January 4th, 2022 be approved. Any questions or concerns? All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Jessica that the December 2021 RCMP report be accepted as information. Staff Sergeant Yetman, it's your call here.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's good to be back for our first meeting, I guess, into the new year. High hopes for 2022, I guess. So what I'll do is I'll give you a rundown of what December of 2021 was like for us. So in December 2021, Brooks Detachment members responded to 334 municipal calls for service. So it was a pretty steady month for us. A total of 21 prisoners were lodged in our detachment cells. There were 91 municipal criminal record checks completed, and a total of 36 violation tickets were issued within the city. And that doesn't count violation tickets that were issued during enhanced patrols, if any occurred during that month. We did have some, more notable calls. In terms of notable calls, I could only really find two that were kind of stood out above the rest. So December the 8th, 2021, Brooks RCMP members were investigating a theft from a local business when they located the suspect nearby. The suspect matched the description provided. Members attempted to effect an arrest on the suspect. However, he resisted, striking one of the members in the head. The member suffered only a minor injury. I believe they were off for a shift or two. Suspect was charged with theft under 5,000 times 2, mischief under 5,000 times 2, resist peace officer, and assault peace officer. The accused was held for a judicial interim release hearing, bail hearing, and was released by the JP. On December the 14th, 2021, Brooks RCMP members responded to a complaint of a male performing a sexual act outside of a local business. Members attended, located the male who was arrested for committing an indecent act, as well as for having outstanding warrants. The male was remanded into custody. So that was kind of our notable files, a couple of them. Staffing-wise, at the detachment, things are going pretty well. Our watches are almost all up to full snuff in terms of how many members they're supposed to have, and that's on the constable side. Unfortunately, we're still having issues with attracting corporals, so supervisors to Brooks. That's something I'm currently working on with staffing, pretty much even as we speak. I talked to them as recently as Friday afternoon, so we're working on that, and that's something we hope to rectify here in the very near future. We've got 3 members due to be transferred out. We've got 2 leaving at the end of this month, and we have 1 leaving, I believe, sometime in February, if things go as planned. And we've already received, for those 3 that are going out, we've already received 2 coming in. So things are looking better than they did in years past, where it seemed like people were going out, but very little was coming back in. So things are looking good staffing-wise. That's really all I have for you as far as detachment stats go. Guess we can have a look at the crime gauge here. So I'm currently in the works of trying to come up with a better way of providing the stats. We get them from district, from an analyst, and I found out that sometimes they do fluctuate. Like this time, we didn't get a breakdown for just the month of December We got January to December. So what I did was I went in and I extracted the stats manually to find out how many of each file we had. So in looking at the crime gauges, and this is January to December of 2021 compared to the exact same time last year, 2020. So total criminal code offenses have gone up, 14% increase. You'll see that that's 7% persons crime increase, 21% property crime increase, and a 12% other criminal code increase. Property crime for that same period, 17% decrease, break and enters, 43% increase theft of motor vehicle, and that's something that I'll address here shortly, and 29% increase in theft under $5,000, so 34 more instances. As far as the theft of motor vehicle goes, we have noticed a fairly sharp uptick in vehicle thefts here over the last month and a half or so. This is something that we're currently working on. Can't really go into a whole lot of details at present, but we're looking into it to see kind of what is driving this. Pardon the pun. So, like I said, that's something that we're working on. If you look through our other stats, what I did was I took our January to December 2017 to 2021 stats, and I was able to pull our December stats out of there. So some of the notable ones, we had 10 assaults for the month. We had 4 criminal harassments. We had 5 uttering threats, 1 break and enter. We had 12 theft under 5,000. So this would be on the sheet that says January to December 2017 to 2021. Like I said, this covers literally the entire year. So what I did was I just went in and I pulled out what was pertinent to December. Theft under 5,000, you see we had 12 in the month, 4 theft from motor vehicles just in December alone. I do believe that number was higher. 13 possession of stolen property. Mischief, we had 13. Mischief other, we had 2. We also had 2 offensive weapons calls, 5 disturbing the peace calls, 10 fail to comply and breaches, and 5 other criminal code. So that's the common ones. That's our persons and property crimes right there. Are there any questions based on those stats? And unfortunately, you don't have the numbers that I just listed out because, like I said, instead of getting just December this time around, we got January to December. So.
Any questions? Oh, Councillor Waldrop.
Just noting the last one where you just kind of have the flags there, like the issues that are flagged. So I see all those ones that you talked about, the motor vehicle theft.
Correct.
Yeah, all of that. And then I also see the Mental Health Act one is flagged.
Yes.
And that's different from like a general well-being check, it looks like. Is that something that you guys are looking at too, like specifically in addition to the thefts and the
Right.
property crime?
And Mental Health Act is something that we deal with on a regular basis. We have noticed that within the last couple of years, the numbers obviously have gone up. Not to blame everything on COVID, but I would imagine that COVID is playing a role in these numbers being where they're at. Like I said, this is something that we deal with on a regular basis. The RCMP is looking at various ideas on how to better serve these types of calls. So that's something that I'm sure the RCMP in the province will be addressing at a later date. But we go to these and we go there with the mindset of de-escalation, and we go there with the mindset of basically the least intrusive method of dealing with these as possible. And I have to say that for here in Brooks, we're doing a pretty good job resolving these without incident and without use of force. So in most of the cases, it's a very peaceful resolution. So hope that answered your question.
Any other questions? Councillor Prentice?
Excuse me. So you got 21 prisoners there for month of December. Does that seem like a high number? Is that just like an overnight type of thing, or?
Yeah,
Did they
that
get transferred
actually,
out, or?
that number is actually on the low side.
Really?
We're not seeing as many prisoners these days as we used to, although I do notice that the numbers are starting to come back up a little bit. That would be a fair number of prisoners to have. It's not a high number by any stretch. That would be people that are being held for bail hearings, you know, people being held long enough to transport them to Medicine Hat, to the remand center, or wherever they have to go. So it's usually, those people that are being held are usually an overnight stay. You're welcome.
Councillor Jessica, yeah.
Yeah, just looking here at right at the beginning, the year-to-year statistics, and generally the numbers are quite small so far as incidents, so it doesn't take much to really skew the percent change, but if you're looking at other sexual offenses, went from 88 in 2020 to 23 in 2021, so a 229% increase overall. I'm just wondering what's happening there.
Just let me see. Went from 8 to 23. Okay, so when we're looking at, when we talk about other sexual offenses, this is a fairly broadly encompassing title. So what that involves is, like I had mentioned, we had that indecent act that had occurred, and as far as those indecent acts go, we've actually had several of those since I've been here in just shy of a year. That's combined with other sexual offenses such as sexual interference, you know, and basically any other offense that would be in there. So what we have seen is an increased number, I do believe, of the indecent activities. So that would probably be that, and just some of the sexual interference, perhaps anything involving a minor. That would probably be a cause for that rise.
I was going to ask you about the theft of motor vehicles. Like normally in the wintertime when you're, you know, let's say you go into 7-Eleven, you keep your car running. It sounds like there's a little bit more to the theft of vehicles than that, but you don't have to explain totally on that, but it's a little bit more than that then, eh?
You know, it may and it may not be.
Oh, okay.
You know, we are seeing that uptick. The method that the cars are being stolen certainly varies. You know, we are still seeing the cars that are left running in front of a business for a short stop. With the cold weather, you know, if you drove to either one of our big box stores in town, you would see a parking lot during that cold snap we had, a parking lot full of idling vehicles. So, I mean, that is what they say, a target-rich environment, you know, especially for the vehicles that still have keys, you know, that are left in them. So it doesn't take a very smart person to figure out how to get into those. Yeah. So there's a few different things contributing to it for sure, but it's a pretty sharp increase from what we've seen, and certainly something that causes us a little bit of concern around here. So.
And just to clear with the stats there, it's like Councillor Jessica says, it's kind of hard to tell what the numbers sometimes, whatever, and I can't remember like 14% increase not, but I know we had talked about this before. I think 2020 was kind of an awkward year because everything went down a little bit, so the numbers that last year are going to be up more than normal. For sure. We'll get probably a better feel for it next year or as we go along there too.
Yeah, so. And I think things are going to kind of return to pre-pandemic levels, you know, anytime here in the very near future. Not that that's a great thing, because it was kind of nice having that little break during the pandemic. It seemed like crime went down quite a bit. But I expect it to return to normal at some point here. not normal per se. But
One more question here. Counselor Wardrop?
I'm just curious, the same issues that kind of are flagged or we're dealing with here, is that also a provincial trend, or is that just kind of unique to our community?
for which, for any of them?
For the ones that are flagged, like, so
Yeah.
the motor vehicle theft and for yeah, anything
Yeah.
that's flagged for us here.
So what you're seeing there, anything that's flagged on there would be unique to us.
Okay,
Here in Brooks. Now, that said, you know, if I was in Bow Island, I would probably get my stats handed to me and I would have maybe a couple of different things highlighted. Kind of what we see though is if you take a cluster of detachments, they all generally tend to have the same issues. You know, if property crime is on the rise here in Brooks, there's it's a safe bet that property crime will be on the rise in Red Cliff, Bow Island, Bassano, kind of all in that one cluster. So what you see on there is very specific to us, but it would be similar, I believe, to other detachments in this area.
yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, no other, one other question. Counselor Idris?
Under common police activities, what does a spousal abuse survey code mean?
Okay, basically what that is anytime we deal with a complaint that falls into the parameters of spousal abuse. And that can be anything, it can include an assault between two intimate partners. It can involve even something as simple as a child, or not simple, but even something like a child custody issue. You know, so if we get a phone call from one parent saying, you know, my ex hasn't returned the kids, that's also scored as a spousal abuse. Because what it is, the definition is it's a conflict between two current or former intimate partners, right? So that's a line of scoring that we use to identify those files.
Okay, looks like no other questions here. Thank you for your time this afternoon, Staff Sergeant.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
All right, you as well. Take
Yeah.
care.
Okay, back to the motion there. Moved by Counselor Jessica that the December 2021 RCMP report be accepted as information. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Counselor Nesbitt that the following items of correspondence be received as information updates on council conferences and workshops and the accounts payable listing and the council committee from January 11th. Any council or conferences? We'll start at that end down there. No. John? No. Councilor Prentice?
Nothing to report.
Councilor Goodenough?
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Councilor Wardrop?
Nothing to report.
And Councilor Jessica. Okay, to the motion then. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councilor Prentice that council accept the broadband report as information. And I believe Bruce is coming to the table to present that. And Alan too, okay. Alan.
Through the chair to mayor and council, we will take turns on this. I think most of this is Bruce's, but at the end, if council has any questions, by all means, we'll answer them to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Bruce. Go ahead.
Through the chair to mayor and council. Excuse me, I need to put my glasses on. We have the distinct pleasure of announcing that the new fiber optic network being built in cooperation with the City of Brooks and Community Network Partners, Inc. will be called BrooksNet. A project such as this requires a group of companies with distinct experience in various areas, and we are pleased to be working with these companies and would like to acknowledge their participation in this project. Jordan, slide 1. Okay. First, we'd like to recognize Crown Capital and their wholly owned subsidiary Community Network Partners, Inc., or CMPI. Crown Capital saw the opportunity that existed within the City of Brooks as an underserved broadband community and was willing to invest over $15 million of the $20 million plus project cost. Without their investment, this project would not be viable for the City of Brooks. CNPI's experience will be used to manage and operate the fiber optic network to ensure a 24/7, 365 service that meets or exceeds the industry standards. As you can see on the slide on here, the numbers that have been compiled have been by the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Department from the Government of Canada, using data that's a little bit older, but very relevant. I think it was 2020. There's 5,000 approximate residences within the city of Brooks, which gives us a density of almost 1,100 residents per kilometer within the city boundaries. This typically, and which is the reason why Crown was so interested in participating with us, is the 5,000 household threshold is where most is that level of density that is required for a company such as Crown Investment in order to wanting to invest in a jurisdiction such as ours. Community Network Partners was born out of a passion to support Canadians living in a rural and remote areas by giving them access to the kind of network typically only available in large urban centers. Second, we would like to acknowledge Light Access as our general construction partner. Light Access has been installing fiber optic networks since 2004 and has deployed many fiber optic networks across Western Canada. Most recently, they have been pivotal in deploying a 750,000 broadband backbone in Clearwater County and finished deploying phase 1 of that network in 2002. Light Access is also constructing a fiber to the home, or FTTH fiber optic network for, and I apologize, the Tunaka Nation Council in Cranbrook, BC. It is from these construction projects that make Light Access an excellent fit as they draw upon their experiences to help build our fiber optic network in the most effective way with the least amount of disturbances to the residents of Brooks. Our third partner is the Ibi Group. The Ibi Group is a Canadian design and technology firm that has been active within Alberta since 1976. Ibi has helped plan, design, and implement fiber optic networks in a variety of settings, including the Durham region in Ontario, as well as projects in Clearwater County and the city of Lethbridge. As Ibi Group Intelligent Systems Practice Lead Keith Ponton so eloquently said, affordable high-speed internet is critical to helping improve the quality of life for those living in rural communities, especially in light of pandemic, where more people are working and attending school from home. We are excited to work with the City of Brooks and our consortium of partners to design and implement a high-speed internet infrastructure, creating opportunities for the city and the city's residents and businesses. To round out the group, we have ONET as our initial internet service provider, or ISP. ONET has been providing internet, television, and telephone connectivity to end users for the last decade. ONET provides a responsive and state-of-the-art fiber optic network, along with great customer service for residential and commercial customers. The knowledge that they will bring will help the City of Brooks promote this new network and bring on new and eager customers and businesses within the City of Brooks as the network becomes available. So what is a fiber optic network, or a fiber to the home network? An FTTH broadband network refers to a fiber optic cable that is connected to a central office or a point of presence and is terminated in an individual's home, apartment building, or commercial business. The fiber optic network is being designed to ensure a maximum amount of uptime for its users and that outages are kept to a minimum and/or isolated to only small sections of the network. The high availability and resiliency that is being implemented in this network, along with the 24/7 Network Operations Center, or NOC, will ensure that the experience of the end user is unlike one that they have ever experienced before. So how fast is a 1 gigabit per second network? Approximately, if you were to download an 85 meg music album off of iTunes as an example, that would take approximately less than 1 second. If you were to download a 2-hour movie in standard definition, which would be 720 or less, and it would be approximately 1 gigabyte in size. That would take approximately 8 seconds. If you were to download an HD quality, or like a 1080p type video, that's 4 gigs in size, that would take approximately 32 seconds in length. If you were to download an ultra high definition, or 4K, that is approximately 20 gigabytes in size, it would take approximately 3 minutes to download. For those that are gamers, a game that is approximately 45 gigs in size to download would take approximately 3 minutes to download. Mobile applications, high quality photos, and web pages and email all would take less than 1 second. If we were to compare that to a 50 meg download time, the music album would take 14 seconds. The movie, for standard definition, would take 3. High definition would take 11. And the 4K movie would still take 53 minutes. For those that are gamers, they would spend approximately 2 hours waiting to play their game. The mobile app would take approximately 5 seconds to download, and your high quality photo or web page or email surfing would still be approximately 1 second. Unfortunately, too many residences and businesses within Brooks are not meeting the new CRT recommendation for broadband internet service of 50 megs for downloads and 10 megs for uploads. According to the Canadian Internet Registry Association, or CIRA, and their My Internet Performance Test website, which is listed in the report, that tracks internet speeds and the location of the test. Approximately 72% of the internet connection speed is 20 megabits or less. Those, if you look at the screen, the ones that are some form of red would be that 72%. So like the dark red, the pink, and then the light pink, that would be where the 72% would be. Approximately 18% of the internet services between 21 and 50 megs, so the white colored one, or the white colored dots on the screen, receive 21 to 50 megs. And only 10% of the residents exceed the CRT recommendations of 50 and 10, which are shown by the blue colored dots, from light blue to dark blue. These results show there is a need within the community for this type of service. The numbers also do not reflect the number of businesses on the south side of the railroad track that can't use wired ISP services, as there is limited infrastructure in the city. So what about 5G wireless? For the last 12 to 24 months, major telephone carriers have been suggesting that 5G will solve internet problems. 5G is in its infancy and is usually only slightly faster than the 4G LTE networks that are commonly deployed, which means a user could see download speeds of 80 to 100 megabits and 5 to 10 megabits for uploads. For the 5G wireless solution to provide the same speeds as the fiber optic network, approximately 30 plus mini communication towers would need to be installed around the city to get the coverage of our FTTH network would provide. 5G users would still have internet speed issues, 5G users would still have internet speed issues in heavier wooded areas of the city, but especially around homes with pine trees, as the radio frequency or RF energy being used to transmit data is absorbed by the pine tree needles. There's also issues with weather, as heavy rain and snowstorms may cause internet outages. The other big concern with any cellular option is data usage and data overage charges, as cell phone plans typically do not include unlimited data, and it's very possible to have overage charges, especially when streaming video content. What are the benefits of having an open access fiber optic network? One of the very first ones would be economic development. During the beginning stages of COVID-19, staff spoke with business and asked what would help their business recover. Enhanced internet service was identified in surveys to improve COVID-19 recovery efforts. Economic development also heard from potentially interested businesses that internet connectivity is one of the key considerations on making locational decisions. And as mentioned before, the industrial section on the south side of the railroad track is underdeveloped. Another economic benefit of an open access fiber optic network is that we are not restricting the use of network to a single ISP. Over time, this open access this fiber network will become a marketplace where end users are able to choose the ISP that they wish to use and the services that they wish to purchase. This competitive marketplace will help ensure the availability of competitive pricing from various vendors. A second benefit would be smart city initiatives. In addition to helping businesses, it also allows the City of Brooks to take advantage of different smart city initiatives that could directly impact residents. Here are just a few examples that could be explored to see if they would be a good fit for our community. Smart traffic intersections to help alleviate traffic congestions. Smart water meters and monitoring that would help users by letting them know that they have a leaky toilet or faucet by tracking water usage. Virtual healthcare services that will allow people to age in place rather than having to utilize aged care facilities. Enhancing shopping and recreational activities by providing free public Wi-Fi to key locations. Smart waste management where we can track waste bin utilization. And environmental monitoring to help citizens know about air quality. Smart city design focuses on how we can make the lives of our citizens even better than they are today. The great thing about having a fiber optic network is that we can take advantage of different smart city initiatives that other communities won't be able to, and lever this to our advantage in attracting new residents and businesses. Smart city initiatives is above and beyond the scope of this project and would require additional resources. However, it would greatly facilitate this project. A third A third benefit would be attracting new residences and businesses. The second on the top 10 list of business location decision-making priorities is connectivity and broadband. It has also been reported that internet connectivity speeds are a top 5 requirement when deciding where to purchase a new or existing home. One of the few positives that has come about in the last 2 years is the growing acceptance that people no longer need to live in the community that they work. We are now seeing an exodus of people from larger centers such as Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and/or Edmonton into rural communities. There are a lot of attractive reasons to live in a smaller community. Cheaper housing, easier access to recreational facilities, environmental factors, and smaller to no commute times. By providing a fiber optic network that is capable of great uploads and download speeds, office workers are now able to work from home. A fourth benefit would be its investment. This is a generational investment that will impact our community for years to come and allow the residents and businesses to face the future. With the right resources and tools, we will be able to compete not only on a local and regional scale, but a globally one as well. Project financials.
I'll take over from Bruce there. We'll give his voice a break. Thank you very much, Bruce. Through the chair to mayor and council. Again, with the financials, the capital costs, as mentioned earlier, the city's investment is $5.4 million, and Crown Capital will be investing just over $15 million at full build-out. Our contribution is funded 100% from the gas tax fund, and that will actually pay for the construction of the backbone of the fiber optic network, and that'll be owned by the city. Crown Capital will then do the construction of the distribution network, so that'll take it from the backbone out to the individual residences and businesses, and of course they will own that distribution system. The annual operating revenues and costs, we do have the slide up on the board. That's a little dated already because we see some money coming in 2021 and we haven't started the construction yet, so we're behind there. But the city's revenue will be $10 per month per customer that accesses the network. The network will be maintained and operated by CNPI, which is Canadian Network Partners, Inc. And of course, the city will have to pay for the maintenance from those revenues received. There are a bunch of common costs in there for doing that, and the city will be paying 10% of that. Again, the projections are lagging as construction did not start. Based on the forecast, it can be seen there are potentially substantial financial benefits to the city as well. And not everything goes as planned, so should market penetration not go as planned, we have negotiated safeguards into our agreements to limit most of our portion of common costs to $6,000 per month, and the total of all common costs will never exceed the revenues that we're supposed to receive from this project. So what we've tried to do in that is take advantage of the opportunities to make some revenue and at the same time limit the cost to our tax base. Of course, we will have that backbone that we own, which will be costs over and above if, heaven forbid, somebody tears into that backbone, then that line would have to be repaired, and, you know, we will have that on first call, so hopefully if any of the other utilities do that, they will be responsible for the payment of those costs. However, if we accidentally hook on it ourselves when we're doing a water dig, then we would be responsible for that. Of course, any issues with or repairs needed to the distribution portion of the network, that would be the responsibility of CMPI. I might as well keep going, Bruce, and since you talked a lot longer than I have. General timelines, depending on when we can get into the ground, we are targeting April for the commencement of construction. We're hoping we can get a construction season from April to November, depending on the weather. And we want to have a significant portion of the network done in 2022, and what isn't done in 2022 will be completed in 2023. Another nice thing about this project is we are constructing it in zones. So I think 7 or 8 zones, is it, Bruce? Yes, it is. So once a zone is done, it can be lit, so we don't have to wait for all the zones to be up and operating before we can receive revenues from it. And that is our report. We recommend that it be accepted as information, and we're willing to answer any questions.
I'll open it up to questions. Councilor Jessica.
One of the things we're hearing a lot about now is cost overruns on projects of any size. Are we vulnerable for that?
Alan, yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair to Councilor Jessica, yeah, you always do have those concerns. We're working diligently right now looking at what that might be since this was put out for proposals. We do have, you have supply chain issues that you're dealing with. So looking at this, one of the things where we feel that we will benefit, however, is the design that IBI is working on. They're limiting the number of meters just because of the efficient operation. So we're going to hope that that covers that off, and yes, that's always an issue with any project we do, for sure.
Councilor Wardrop.
Thanks. First of all, thanks for your report, guys. I'm so excited reading it. I can't wait for this to come to fruition. I have a couple questions. One is, so this is going to be developed in zones. Do we have a priority for which zones will be developed first?
I think your place.
My place, yeah. Oh, it's all like, yeah.
Just joking. Go ahead, Bruce, sorry.
We do have zones. The very first zone is Zone D, which is where the POP is located, so basically here at City Hall. And then from that, it will rotate out, but I believe the next one is west of us, but below Castle's. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah, I think so it's directly to the west of us, but below Castle's, but constrained by the railroad. I don't have a map right here in front of me, or otherwise I'd be
Sorry to
able
put you on this.
Go ahead, Alan.
I think the first one will take in quite a bit of the central business district.
Yes, it does.
I guess that's what I was getting at, is that, are we gonna, yeah, great, awesome. And then I have another question. Earlier it said, like, the least amount of disturbance is, what would that look like? Is there going to be,
The disturbance through the chair to Councilor Wardrop, the disturbance is because we're using directional boring, a lot of the ground disturbances that would typically be with trenching are going to be mitigated just because we're going directly into the ground, into a conduit right away, right? So there may be a little bit of, definitely as the crews are setting up, there may be some spots where the crews are setting up and where where the drilling bit will eventually get, that could impede traffic slightly. But I don't suspect that they'll be at any one location for more than for one day, and probably in some cases not more than for several hours until they get to the spot where they were projected. That being said, the network is also being designed in such a way that we're not trying to be in the roadbed. We're actually trying to put as much of the network into the back alleys and boulevards as we possibly can, so that it just isn't on your general driving surfaces. It's too hard to maintain a network in that type of an environment. Or
Councilor Goodenough?
Great, thank you. Looking forward to this, the stream happening here for Brooks. Just a couple questions that talking with Joe Citizen would ask. You mentioned backbone costs if that was to be replaced. We know that technology does change and it quickly advances. How long do you expect our current backbone to last before we will have to replace it?
Through the mayor, or through the chair to Councillor Goodenough, there would be, I would suspect that if it's well maintained, and I would, with the service agreements that we have in place, it will be, that 30 years to 40 years is not unreasonable, and having a 50-year lifespan is quite doable as well. Just like any other asset, over time would change, although right now a fiber optic network is the most future-proof type of network that you can get. The main reason being is as more video streaming content increases, so as we go from 4K to 8K, the ability for us to upgrade the network from, say, a 10 gig to a 40 gig or even into 100 gig is merely changing out a few little components, and all of a sudden we've increased the capacity of that network quite easily.
Amazing. When do you think that we could expect ONET to be setting up shop and start attracting clientele?
Alan.
Well, we're hoping as soon as possible. When we sign one more contract, we're still working. They'll have what's called an exclusivity contract for a certain period of time. And we haven't negotiated those details yet, but as soon as that's done, they'll be out in marketing for sure. And in the meantime, you know, we want as many people, obviously, for the city on there, because the more there is, the more revenue. So we will also be using our communications to market the services as well. So, but we don't have that date exactly yet.
My last question would be then for home delivery. You mentioned back alleys, preferred location. So does that mean, like similar to what TELUS or Shaw, I think Shaw runs a line underground to your house. A fiber optic cable is a lot thicker, I would imagine. No? Okay, so again, Joe Citizen here. Is this just a typical cable line that's coming into my house? Could you please explain that?
So before we'd come onto anybody's property, everybody that signs up would also have to sign off on an entrance agreement stating that they were willing for us to come, or our contractors to come on board. At that point, we would terminate or bring a fiber off of that distribution fiber that's in the back alley and bring it into their home, and potentially at the choosing of that resident. So it doesn't necessarily, we'll pick the place best for you. If there's a place that might be more suitable for you, we definitely would bring that into play. But for the most part, they're going to try and disturb the ground in your yard as least amount as possible. That being said, if depending upon the installation method, especially if they have to have some sort of an open trench type of a situation where they would have to use like a trench auger. I'm probably using the wrong term. I'm an IT guy, not a construction guy. But let's say that they had something like that. The biggest concern at that point is that we would remediate it and then have to potentially come back and remediate it maybe a second time, just because the ground is going to slough in. But the point is to bring it back to its original state.
Okay, Alan?
Unfortunately for us, because that's coming off the distribution system, that will not be our cost.
So just to clarify, so then that won't be a city cost or,
CNPI.
or a purchaser? Like if I'm,
No.
if I'm going into agreement with these?
CNPI is totally responsible for installing that drop into the home, plus ensuring that the remediation of that drop is done.
Okay,
So it-
excellent. Thank you very much for your questions, answers.
Counselor Idris?
Thank you for the report, Bruce. Just a few questions. Did I hear correctly that, and maybe Alan touched on that a little bit later, there will be more than one internet service provider later on, once we go through the exclusivity, right? Okay.
Yes.
And are we thinking even big names like Shaw
We,
and
we
Telus,
are,
or
we are not opposed to any, if somebody wants to join onto our open access network, we are not opposed to any type of network coming and utilizing our fiber, whether it's one of the major telcos or if it's one of the local ISPs.
And we will still remain within $10 per, for us?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned zones. When we say 2023, does that mean all the zones will be done by then, or are we thinking this is just the one?
Our hope is to get as much completed in 2022 as much as possible. If we should fail in that regard, then we would start again at the spring of 2023 and try and complete that as much as
For
possible.
the whole city?
And the whole city would probably be done, I'm not going to give it, well, I would hope by July 1st, but you never know depending upon construction methodology and all the rest of it.
Okay, Alan?
We'll circulate a map of those zones for everybody, and then what they are planning on where they're gonna go from zone to zone, so everybody has that.
So with the disturbance that will happen when it's coming to someone's house, are we going to ask, for example, like for example, when we built our home, it was already, like the cables, everything was done even before with new build, are we going to say we want fiber also to be available, or it's going to be still?
Like,
Let's say someone is building a new house. As now, you do cables and internet even before you build, so that TELUS just doesn't need to come into that.
yeah, it would be like any other service, much like gas, water, or power. We would, if the homeowner or the developer at that point wish to bring fiber into that home right initially, definitely they can, there is no reason why they wouldn't be able to bring that in during the construction process of that new home business.
How about fees? Like, let's say I want to get fiber.
That will end up being developed, or those pricing guides will end up being developed by the ISPs. The city, Alan has a question there.
And yeah, we did have some when we did the request for a proposal from ONET. Fortunately, this project's taken quite some time, so we'll have to see once we get the exclusivity arrangement in place. They'll probably update those for us and we'll circulate them. We do have some old ones though, but I don't know if they're still relevant.
Like the question is it going to be comparable to getting TELUS or getting Shaw? Or?
Absolutely, that's what we're told for sure.
Okay, so my final question, in terms of the penetrations percentages that you came up with, how did you come up with that?
The percentages that were listed for market penetration were actually developed by CMPI and their accounting department, or their accounting or finance group. But that's based upon past history and previous deployments in other jurisdictions. So they have felt, and they feel that these are quite achievable numbers.
Okay. Thank you. Exciting.
Go ahead. Did you have something else, Alan?
Yeah, also through the chair to Councilor Idris, I think they also looked at the experience of ONET when they moved into Olds there as well.
Councilor Wardrop?
Oh, I'm not sure if you guys can answer this question, but I'm curious, just because we were so underserved, I was really surprised to see us at the top of this list of underserved communities across the country. Do we have some kind of projections for growth in the city in terms of economic growth, like similar similar-sized cities and similar situations that have had broadband come in and, you know, seen the growth there. I'm just curious if we have any kind of idea about what this could,
Is your question population growth or residential growth? Is that your
I'm
question?
talking about business growth mostly. Just, you know, it's,
Oh, I see what you're
It
saying.
seemed like it's
Because of
right-
this, what are the, what are the
yeah, like if
benefits?
it's,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
it's so high on the priority list, right? For businesses when they
Alan
decide,
can
yeah.
answer that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you through the chair to Council Wardrop. And that's a really good question. And, you know, we have some anecdotal evidence of, you know, what happened to Onet or to Olds when that came into their community. I've done some research in the internet on, some of this is US, and they talk about, and it's a few years old already too, they talk about the GDP increase of cities that have implemented versus others. But again, you know, that doesn't give me exact what's that going to do for Brooks. So really difficult to judge that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I just want to say, I want to thank Bruce and Alan for the work they've done with this project. Like, it's a massive project, and I know you guys put a lot of work into that. And I believe it's going to be a game changer for the city of Brooks there, and it's going to benefit residents for years to come. I think a lot of people at the table here are pretty excited about it, so we're looking forward to that. So thanks again for your work into that, and for Alan's work into this project there.
Thank you.
Okay, to the motion there, moved by Councilor Prentice, that council accept the broadband report as information. All those in favor? Okay, carried. Moved by Councilor Wardrop that council committee meetings for February, March, and November 2022 be held on the following dates at 4:30 in the council chambers if required: February 15th, 2022, March 15th, and March 29th, 2022, November 15th, and November 29th, 2022. And Alan will talk about this. Oh, sorry, Amy will talk about this. Sorry, Amy.
I have a little bit more hair than Alan.
No, I know.
Through the chair to mayor and council, at the regular council meeting held on November 1st, 2021, council passed a motion that council committee meetings, if required, be held in council chambers on the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month, commencing at 4:30. Having the council committee meetings on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month allows these meetings to occur the week following regular council meetings. However, in February, March, and November, the second and fourth Tuesday falls the day after the regular council meetings. Administration is proposing that council change the council committee meetings for February, March, and April to February 15th, March 15th, and March 29th, November 15th, and November 29th. Therefore, administration is recommending that the council committee dates are changed to the dates noted.
Okay, any questions? Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councilor Wardrop that February 2022 be hereby proclaimed as Black History Month in the city of Brooks, and this is Richard Mack.
Thank you. Through the chair to mayor and council, Black History Month is a time to learn about Canadian stories and many other important contributions of Black Canadians to the settlement, growth, and development of Canada and their importance to the history of Canada, to this country. The city of Brooks is fortunate to have a very diverse community, which is part of what makes Brooks a community that people are proud to call home. This year, with the pandemic still amongst us, the city will be recommending via social media a list of books and videos that explore Black history in Alberta and North America. Therefore, administration is recommending that February 2022 be formally recognized as Black History Month in the city of Brooks.
Okay, any comments or questions? Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councilor Nesbitt that Cindy Wolfer be appointed to the Grasslands Regional FCSS Board as the City of Brooks member at large commencing January 18th, 2022. This one's another pretty face, Alan.
Thank you. Through the chair to mayor and council, I'm flustered now. The City of Brooks member-at-large position on the FCSS board is vacant, and the FCSS board is asking that Cindy Wolfer be appointed to the board. She's a past FCSS board member who now resides in Brooks, and she is passionate about FCSS and volunteers in different capacities in Brooks. Therefore, the recommendation is that she be appointed to the board commencing January 18th, 2022.
Okay, any questions? Just a couple comments here. I worked with Cindy because I was on FCSS. Yeah, she's very passionate about FCSS. And with all our members at large, I want to thank them for contributing to the community there. This community could not operate without them. So I want to thank Cindy and all the other people in that. Okay, to the motion. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Idris that COVID-19 updates and initiatives be accepted as information. Amanda.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mayor Petrie and council, I have some information for you and some updates as relates to COVID-19. Data from the website that's on the dashboard for the province. It has not been updated yet, and it is still as the data from January 13th as of 5:02 p.m. this afternoon. So data from January 13th based on the provincial's website and dashboard are as follows. The city of Brooks has 182 active cases. We continue with the 24 deaths within our community, and again, we continue to send those deepest condolences and our deepest sympathies to those friends and family who have lost their loved one. As of January 13th, there were 822 people that were in hospital with 81 individuals in ICU. As relates to the province, 89.7% of the 12 and up population have received at least their first dose, with 85.7% of the population receiving their second doses. I do have some numbers as of January 13th for the County of Newell, which includes Brooks and the South Special Area 2. The percentage of population with one dose within our area for all ages is 69.9%. Population of individuals with second doses within our area, that percentage is for all ages is 64.5%. Population or percentage of population with third doses for all ages within the County of Newell is 18%. If you want specific numbers of people, let me know and I'll be happy to email those to you. More than 8 million doses of vaccination have now been administered in Alberta. The new measures that took effect on December 24th, those are still in place. On January 6th, Alberta Health Services launched a comprehensive web resource to help Albertans manage mild COVID-19 symptoms at home. The new web resource contains information on what to do when you have symptoms of COVID-19, how to provide effective care for being at home for yourself and a family member, when to test for COVID-19, and how to manage prolonged COVID-19 symptoms. While much of the information has been available to Albertans throughout the pandemic, this new resource provides a one-step guide to current and reliable information in one location. The site also features newly created videos with several physicians who provide current information to help ensure Albertans to know when to seek immediate medical attention and access care. Following the rapid spread of Omicron throughout the province and the exponential growth of COVID-19 cases, many Albertans are calling HealthLink 811, and they're unsure how to manage their symptoms, or if they need to seek care with a positive COVID-19 test result. While COVID-19 can cause serious illness, most people recover without special treatment. Helping provide assurance to those who can manage their symptoms at home will ensure that Alberta Health Services resources are there for those who need immediate care. If you have questions or need information, you can visit their site at ahs.ca/COVID self-care. Due to the rising demand for PCR tests, the province on January 10th changed the eligibility for these tests to focus on those who need them most. Daily PCR testing volumes began to exceed system capacity, causing wait times for booking a PCR test to approach 4 days, and turnaround time for providing results to patients, which began to approach 48 hours. To ensure that patient care decisions are supported by timely diagnostic information, PCR testing eligibility is now focused on those who have clinical risk factors for severe outcomes and those who live and work in high-risk settings. Alberta Health Services has updated the online COVID-19 assessment tool to help Albertans determine whether they need a PCR test what type of care to seek based on their symptoms, and how to take care of symptoms, again, at home with appropriate support. Those with mild illnesses should not visit emergency departments seeking a test, as tests in those settings are only used when a test is needed for patient care. And if Albertans are unsure whether they need to talk to a doctor about their illness, they can also use the Alberta Medical Association tool to determine what they should do. Most people with mild illness do not need a test or a conversation with their doctor. Employers and organizations should not require individuals with mild symptoms to have a PCR test to be eligible for sick time off from work. It is critical to support those who are sick to stay home with no testing requirements at this time of high transmission. Eligibility criteria can be found at Alberta Health Services website as well. On December 21st, Alberta opened COVID-19 vaccination boosters to all Albertans aged 18 and older, while launching that ambitious booster shot campaign to protect Albertans from the rapidly spreading Omicron variant. Again, all Albertans age 18 and older at 5 months or more from their second dose can book appointments for third doses online with participating pharmacies or through AHS by utilizing the Alberta vaccination booking system or by calling Alberta Health Services at 811. Again, at-home rapid test kits are available, and they are continuing to be available for at-home personal use for regular screening in asymptomatic people or for those who may have had a recent COVID exposure. Again, those tests will aid in early identification of infections so people can isolate to help stop the spread. On December 31st, the Alberta Health Minister announced that Albertans who have been vaccinated with 2 doses will only need to isolate for 5 days instead of the usual 10 days if they test positive for COVID, which started on January the 3rd. Vaccinated people who have symptoms that persist beyond the 5 days must continue to isolate. Those who are feeling better must continue to wear a mask in all situations outside their home for the 5 days following their isolation. People who have not been vaccinated must continue to isolate for at least the 10 days following a positive test and must isolate beyond those 10 days if symptoms persist. Kindergarten to grade 12 students return to school on January the 10th, with post-secondary institutions to remain online through February. The province announced last week that they will no longer be publicly reporting COVID-19 outbreaks outside of high-risk settings, which includes congregate living facilities, continuing care facilities, and acute care facilities. The province is no longer notifying school divisions of active COVID-19 cases in teachers and students, and is simply advising them to self-isolate if they believe they have contracted COVID-19. Both public and Catholic school board spokespersonnel have announced unsustainable absences of teachers, teaching assistants, and students as they continue to conduct in-person classes. City facilities continue to operate within provincial restrictions and guidelines in place. Masking and physical distancing continues to be required while in recreation facilities unless engaged in physical activity. Again, for further information or clarification related to COVID-19, you can visit alberta.ca, the city's Facebook page, or the website. And the province continues to remind Alberta that the best defense against COVID-19 is vaccination. All Albertans are encouraged to get whichever dose of vaccination they're eligible for in order to further protect themselves and keep Alberta's healthcare system from being overwhelmed. This concludes my COVID-19 report, and city staff would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Okay, to the motion then, that COVID-19 updates and initiatives be accepted as information. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Goodenough that bylaw number 2203 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to amend bylaw 1412 being the land use bylaw be introduced and read a first time. And we have Madeline with us again. Good afternoon, Madeline.
Hello, thank you for having me here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. So through the chair to mayor and council, thank you for the opportunity to present on bylaw 22-03. This is related to signs, which are an important component of our urban environment and affect the look and feel of Brooks. The current sign regulations in the City of Brooks land use bylaw need to be updated to be more rational, consistent, and easy to understand So staff has reviewed the current regulations, looking for ways to provide more clarity and streamline the development permit process. So the proposed amendments to update sign regulations in bylaw 22/03 are attached. And there are also other minor changes to the land use bylaw to improve the functionality of regulations that are part of this amendment as well. The proposed changes were presented to Council Committee on December 14th, 2021, and how the bylaw reflects what staff heard at that meeting. And we received support at that time to move forward to a regular council meeting for first reading. So I'll go through a summary of the larger changes to regulations that are in the bylaw. And just to note that aside from these changes, bylaw 22/03 also includes general edits to the wording and formatting of the sign regulations to improve readability and implementation of the land use bylaw. So first up is sign types in land use districts. So under the current regulations, it was unclear which types of signs were allowed in which land use districts. So bylaw 22/03 now includes a table that outlines the types of signs allowed in each land use district. And how we approached deciding on that was by grouping land use districts together based on having similar uses and expected land use impacts on existing development. So we have one category that includes all the land use districts with predominantly residential uses. So residential single detached, small lot, low density, residential manufactured home and home park and future urban development. Then there's a category that includes a mix of residential and small scale commercial uses. So this would include the residential high density land use district and the commercial neighborhood. Then we have pedestrian oriented commercial uses, which is our commercial central land use district. And then we've grouped the remaining commercial and industrial land use districts together, which might have larger commercial and industrial uses. So that's commercial general, industrial light, industrial general, and industrial heavy. And lastly, the final column is the public and park uses land use districts. So that's public and quasi-public service and public recreation and open space. So the table that's shown in the memo is also in the Schedule A of the attached bylaw, and that shows the breakdown. So in general, residential districts are basically don't have signage aside from the signs that do not require a development permit. So a window sign for example, for a home occupation, or if you have a garage sale sign or something like that is allowed in residential districts, but you're not going to be seeing freestanding signs or fascia signs or things like that. The RHD and CN, which are our residential high density and commercial neighborhood, have a mix of residential and commercial. So the sign types are more limited here to recognize the potential impact on where people live. So this is also the same approach for signs allowed in the public land use districts of PPS and POS. So they're more limited there. And then when we move to commercial general and the industrial land use districts, all sign types are listed as permitted, recognizing that these districts are typically separated or don't have residential uses in them, and they're focused on commercial and industrial businesses where advertising and signage is most desired and needed. So next up, I'll just discuss electronic display regulations and how bylaw 22/03 answers a number of questions related to electronic signs that we had some confusion about before. So first of all, bylaw 22/03 allows electronic display on fascia signs and freestanding signs as a permitted use in the commercial, central, commercial, general, and industrial land use districts. And on those same sign types, fascia and freestanding, you can have electronic display in the public land use districts, but in this case, it's discretionary. So that means the decision is made by the Municipal Planning Commission, and it's based on context, and there might be additional conditions applied to the permit. Just to note too, that electronic display is also allowed on window signs. Secondly, council's directed that bylaw 22/03 allow for signs with electronic display to also allow animation. So this means that ads appearing on an electronic display sign could look more like a TV ad or have moving effects. So this would be fascia and freestanding signs in the land use districts I identified. Also, as a part of bylaw 22/03, we simplified the location requirements for signs with electronic display. Previously, separation distances were based on speed limits and the size of the signs. So now the requirements simply state that freestanding signs with electronic display must be a minimum distance of 50 feet from a signalized intersection and not be located within 15 meters of a residential land use district, except in the case where there's a school. So the rationale for these regulations is that signs with electronic display near intersections could potentially be distracting for drivers, and that electronic signs too close to people's homes could have a detrimental effect on their quality of life. So these separation distances are maintained to limit those negative impacts. Lastly, related to electronic display are some updated regulations you'll see in the bylaw, recognizing that this sign type can be challenging to regulate, but it can also have a negative impact if the sign brightness is too high. It can cause safety concerns for drivers or be uncomfortable for pedestrians. And electronic signs can also malfunction in ways that a standard sign cannot. So it's important to have contact information for someone to shut off a sign if needed. So Bylaw 22-03 includes updated regulations for signs with electronic display that ensure a safe standard for these signs and provide clear enforcement guidelines if complaints are received from the public regarding electronic display sign. So next, I'm just going to touch on off-premise sign content, which is also, you might hear, called third-party advertising. So this is when a sign is on, it's in a location, but it's advertising something that is not located on that premise. And the current regulations in the land use bylaw prohibited off-premise advertising except for recreational, community, or not-for-profit purposes, and except in the case of billboards along the Trans-Canada Highway. So recognizing that off-premise advertising is most often associated with signs with electronic display, it makes sense to allow it in this case since the content can be regularly changed with an electronic sign, and a business can both advertise their own operation and make some money off ads for other companies. So Council directed us through Bylaw 22-03 to allow off-premise advertising on any sign type with electronic display. So freestanding signs such as billboards as well will also be allowed to display off-premise advertising, even if they're not electronic, because in that instance, those signs are particularly typically on vacant land that are trying to attract people to come into the city. There were some other regulations related to signs with off-premise advertising related to different speed limit zones or their adjacency to other off-premises signs, which have been removed to simplify implementation and enforcement of the land use bylaw. There's also were a number of updates to other specific sign types within the land use bylaw. So I'll just touch on those. Firstly, for temporary signs, the proposed change is that temporary signs that comply with the bylaw would no longer require a development permit. The rationale for this is that the nature of temporary signs is that they're posted for only 30 days and they're meant to advertise short-term offers or events. So requiring a permit is an unnecessary burden for applicants in the city to review in these cases, as long as they're meeting the other regulations of the land use bylaw. Similarly, it's proposed that window signs that comply with the bylaw also do not require a development permit. So window signs have less of an impact on adjacent development typically, and it has been difficult in the past to track development permits for these, as often people put them up sometimes on temporary basis where they're not aware that they need a development permit for that. So this way, if they're complying with the land use bylaw, they don't need to get a development permit for those. Another change that's shown in Bylaw 22-03 is for billboard signs. So these previously had their own category with a number of regulations in them. Now it's suggested that they are just regulated under freestanding signs, since the structure of a billboard sign is the same as a freestanding sign. The only difference is the location along the Trans-Canada Highway. Another important change is we're now requiring that Alberta transportation approval is provided prior to submitting a development permit to the city. So it's important that signs along the highway meet Alberta transportation standards for safety, and they do have to apply for a permit to them. So it makes sense that if we require their approval first, we're ensuring that the applicant doesn't waste time on an application for the city that could end up being denied by the province. So that will streamline that process. In general, for fascia, projecting, freestanding, and blade signs, which were previously called shingle and under canopy signs, we've updated regulations to remove anything that was, didn't make sense or was difficult to implement, and also made all the wording consistent with regulations across each section, so there's no confusion around the wording, and also have deleted regulations that were already covered by the general regulations for all sign types, which is at the beginning of the sign schedule. So this should make regulations easier to understand and apply for both the applicants and the development authority. And we don't have duplicate conditions throughout different sections that could lead to mistakes when amendments are made and creates a longer set of regulations for the development officer to review. When it comes to freestanding signs, a couple changes are now counting multi-tenant signs as one freestanding sign. So if you have a business where there's, a number of businesses on one lot or within one building, they can now advertise on one sign structure, and that will just be counted as one sign. So that reduces sign clutter, and it's a more practical and affordable option for lots with multiple businesses. We've also adjusted the maximum sign area and height based on the land use district. So this is recognizing that previously there were just a one size fits all for a maximum sign size for freestanding signs in all locations. And that might not always make sense, as it was pretty large for areas that had residential uses or that were geared to smaller scale pedestrian oriented commercial development. So the table in the memo and the bylaw now shows the maximum area and height for freestanding signs in different land use districts. And you'll see that that size scales up based on the land uses in the land use districts, as well as things like what the maximum height is in that land use district, so that you're not having freestanding signs towering over buildings, for instance. So that's a summary of all of the changes I've identified related to signs that are all shown in Schedule A of Bylaw 22-03. There were some other amendments identified unrelated to signs that it was a good opportunity to make these changes as well, recognizing that a land use bylaw is a living document that does require update from time to time to improve its usability and respond to changes in policies or development. So over the last year or so, staff has been keeping track of these regulations that don't make sense or need some refinement. And those specific updates are now included at the beginning of the bylaw. So I'll just go through what those changes are. So first of all, decreasing the minimum lot size and width for semi-detached and townhome units. Previously, there was one size for semi-detached and townhome units, and it was unclear if that was in the case where these units can be subdivided or not. And this change now means since this type of housing development is meant to be a bit more higher density than a single detached home, the lot size should be calculated per unit in case the units are subdivided, and that makes a lot more sense for development of this type of unit. We've also removed the build within area for front setbacks in residential land use districts. So in residential land use districts, there was a minimum front setback and a maximum front setback, and this resulted in the requirement of a lot of variance requests. Instead, we're just requiring a minimum setback of 5 meters, which is pretty standard across most land use bylaws that just have a minimum front setback. And of course, you can go larger than that if you desire. We've also deleted site coverage for discretionary uses in the RHD land use district. This was the only land use district that had this separate category of a different site coverage for permitted versus discretionary uses. And it was unclear why that was captured that way. So we just simplified that to keep it consistent with other land use districts. We very slightly increased the residential garage wall height. This was based on feedback from industry, just stating that the way the number was written, it would have required that every kind of 2x4 would have to be shaved off a little bit. So we just updated that in a very small way to make that simpler. We've removed the requirement that detached garages must be 2.4 meters from a house in residential land use districts. So we're instead keeping it consistent that a minimum distance of 1.5 meters is required between any accessory building, which would include detached garages and the principal building on a lot. So that was the number that was used for general accessory buildings, a shed or anything like that. So that's now consistent. We've decreased the parking requirement for entertainment facilities and restaurants based on requirements for similar types uses. And this should result in less variance requests and still provides adequate parking for development. Excuse me. We've also clarified the maximum projections into flankage yards, not just front yards. So this was just when you have a lot on the corner, you have a front yard and you also have a flankage yard. And it was unclear what the projections could be into the flankage yard because those were not specifically defined. We've also added to the definitions for auto and equipment rental and sales, building and trade contractor and repair shop to clarify what activities can be accessory or part of the primary use in those cases. So I know that was a lot of detail there, but if there's any questions about what shows up in the beginning of that bylaw, just happy to answer those. Just to note that the proposed bylaw has been circulated to the County of Newell and Alberta Transportation. So we haven't received any specific comments yet, but those will be brought forward to council once we receive those. So the intent of bylaw 22-03 is to have a more streamlined, rational, and comprehensive set of rules for signs in Brooks. The updated land use bylaw ideally should be more straightforward for applicants and the development authority to understand and implement. And the other proposed changes that we are doing to the land use bylaw are tweaks that will bring more clarity to the development process and are part of the evolution of the land use bylaw to meet the needs of developers, staff, council, and the community. The resolutions before you today are that bylaw 22-03 be introduced and read a first time, and that a public hearing be held on February 7th, 2022 to gather public input. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions? I know we discussed this in length at one of our committee meetings there. So anybody questions at this time? Okay, back to the motion then, that bylaw number 2203 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to amend bylaw 1412 being the land use bylaw be introduced and read a first time. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Jessica that a public hearing be held on February 7th, 2022 at 5 p.m. to gather public input regarding bylaw 2203. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you, Madeline. I think that's all for you this afternoon. Have a good afternoon. Moved by Councillor Prentice, that bylaw number 2201 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to regulate the proceedings of council and council committee meetings be introduced and read a first time. Amy.
Thank you. Through the chair to mayor and council. Administration has recently updated the city's procedural bylaw to align with current practice of council and council committee meetings. This bylaw was presented to council committee on January 11th, and I'll review the updates that have been made. Excuse me. Adding a definition for acting mayor, appointing an acting mayor, and assigning duties throughout the bylaw. Replacing in-camera or in-camera session with closed meeting. Appointing the deputy and acting mayor at each organizational meeting. Changing council committee meetings to being held when required rather than regularly. Including a reference to the public notification bylaw when communicating the date or time change of a meeting. Including assigning signing authority on the agenda items to be approved at an organizational meeting. Removing council of the whole from the bylaw as the process is similar to closed meetings. Removing the listing of items that may be discussed in closed meetings as the items are listed in the FOIP Act. Removing the requirement for agenda items to be urgent in order to add them to the agenda at a meeting, and removing the 2/3 approval in order to add non-urgent agenda items. Reorganizing the order of agenda items and removing the requirement for 2/3 approval to differ from the order presented. removing the requirement to have unanimous consent for a delegation to present for longer than 10 minutes, removing the audio recording requirement as meetings are now streamed and posted or stored on the city's social media accounts, removing the limit of times that a council member may speak on an item, and removing the time limit on council and committee meetings. The one change from council committee is that the acknowledgement of First Peoples and traditional territory has been removed from the numbered portion of the agenda. However, it will still be read at the beginning of each meeting. Therefore, administration is recommending that Bylaw 2201 receive 3 readings and be adopted.
Any questions on this one? Councillor Goodenough.
I'm just curious on the 10-minute rule for people speaking, I guess. So are we saying then there's no limit? Or we're going to limit them, or it has to be assigned?
Through the chair to Councillor Goodenough, the chair, so the mayor or yourself if you're acting as deputy mayor, has the ability to allow them to go past that time limit.
And so would that be predetermined, or would that be if they've ran out of time and you can see, and then you say, I'd like to extend 10 more minutes too?
Through the chair to Councillor Goodenough, it could be both options, I think. Usually we'll tell people when they're coming to present or ask people, can you do this in 10 minutes? If not, we'll give them that extra time, but it also could be done directly at the meeting as well.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the other side of that too, I mean, from somebody maybe going on a little bit too long, we can kind of sort of put a halt to it too there too, right? Is that right, Amy?
Through the chair to Mayor Petrie, as the chair, you can do
Stop it
whatever you'd
whenever.
like.
Okay. Okay, that's powerful. Okay, we got about 3 minutes before we have to make another motion here, so we got to get this one passed here. Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay, all those in favor? Good. And we did that just in time. Moved by Councillor Woodruff that Bylaw 2201 be read a second time. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Prentice that Bylaw 2201 be given 3 readings at this meeting, and this has to be carried unanimously. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Nesbitt that 2201 being a bylaw in the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to regulate the proceedings of council and council committee meetings be read a third time and adopted. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Jessica that bylaw 2202 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to establish a Safe Communities Committee be introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mayor and Council, administration has also recently updated the Safe Communities Committee bylaw after the committee recommended the number of citizen-at-large members be increased due to increased interest from residents to serve on the committee. This bylaw was also presented to Council Committee on January 11th, and the following updates have been made. Removing 2 requirements under duties and responsibilities to align with other city boards, committees, and commissions, as well as current practice. Increasing the number of citizens at large from 9 to 10. Decreasing the age for youth members from 16 to 15. Outlining the process for youth member applications, which mirrors the citizen at large process. Including a member of the Municipal Enforcement Department on the committee and an advisory non-voting role. Clarifying how and when council members on the committee are appointed. Adding a subsection that allows the committee to meet virtually, and providing authority to the committee to approve expenditures that are included in the committee's annual budget. Therefore, administration is recommending that bylaw 2202 receive 3 readings and be adopted.
Okay, any questions? Okay, to the motion that bylaw number 2201 being a bylaw in the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to establish a Safe Communities Committee be introduced and read a first time. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Idris that bylaw 2202 be read a second time. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Counselor Goodenough that bylaw 2202 be given 3 readings at this meeting, and this has to be carried unanimously. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. And moved by Counselor Idris that bylaw 2202, being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to establish a Safe Communities Committee, be read a 3rd time and adopted. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, and to the media there. Sandra, any questions? Remember, it can't be too many. You got another meeting to go to here.
Good evening, everybody. All is well. A few questions. I'm going to start with the first one. That's the odd man out. The COVID-specific numbers, so I don't forget. Amanda, if you could send those to me, I would really appreciate it, please. Thank you. Okay. Who is constructing the broadband?
Through the chair to Sandra, it's Light Access Technologies.
They're actually doing the full,
They're the contractor, but they will be definitely using subcontractors to do the work.
okay, thanks. And can you please explain the safeguard that you discussed right at the beginning? And can you put your mic down closer to your mouth, please? Thank you.
You want to hear me? Sure, so what we've done in our agreements is we want to protect our tax base. One of the things that we don't want this project to do is to cost the taxpayer money going on. So if penetration rates aren't there where they're at, what we have done is there's something called common costs that we would have to pay. So it could be network equipment maintenance because the data has to go through not only the distribution system, but also through our backbone to get to them. So we pay 10% of those costs, and CNPI will be paying 90% of those costs. But what we want to do is we want to ensure that those won't go over and above the revenues that we receive. So we've got 2 protections in there. One is that the majority of those costs, there's a few minor variable ones, but the majority of them won't go more than $6,000 a month, and all of them in total will not go over the revenues that we will receive from it.
Is that forever, or is that for 20 years?
I believe this contract with the service agreement, I think, is for the first 5 years for sure.
Okay, you're also talking about $10 per month to the city. Is that also for 5 years?
Yes, that's in the 5-year contract that we have now, and then the contract would have to be renewed, hopefully with the same outfit, otherwise you have to find another service provider. But the owner will remain the same, and the owner, their subsidiary basically is the one that's doing the service contract, so that works best for them to make their financial models work.
Okay, so who will be setting the price per month, though, for customers?
That will be up to the individual internet service provider, so whether it's ONET or TELUS or Shaw or any other internet service provider that comes online.
Okay, so the TELUS, the Shaws, the 3 big, whoever it may be, through the open access program, they can come on and use the system that you're building. Is there also a, does that start in 5 years as well, or does that start immediately?
It won't start immediately. We're still working on the exclusivity agreement with ONET, and we don't have all the details there. There may be, you know, we've been talking about what if we have some local providers? Wouldn't we want them on right away as well? So we still have those details to work out yet, Sandra. But after that exclusivity period, however that might shape out, any internet service provider can access that if they would like, for sure.
Okay, how much has been spent to date of the $5.4 million?
I can get that exact number. I would say under 100,000 so far.
Okay, and I guess an overall looking ahead question. Will this project make money for the city of Brooks? And when?
Well, when you look at the projections and the models that they have, we should be able to see money in the first year, 2021, I think they had us losing, what, $730 or something like that. So I think when we get into our first full year of operation, we should be in the positive.
So although it's $5.4 million from the gas tax, you're really not looking at recouping that until 2049, I think, 2039? And you're not really looking at it as recouping that cost at all. You're just looking at making money? Is that?
I think, for me, the number one priority of this project is to get broadband into the city of Brooks and the benefits that it could bring. If we can make money on it, I think that's fantastic. You know, we can use that money on debentures on other infrastructure projects or to lower the taxes.
Just to add to that, Sandra, there's the tertiary economic benefit of it. If it keeps people in town or we have new development in town, we're making money that way there too. So there's, you know, I mean, I know you're looking at the hard costs, but there's also what I call the tertiary. And that's where I really see, you know, some economic advantage to the community here too. Keeping people here, attracting people here, you know, you know, with the high-speed internet there, so.
That's fine for now, thank you.